Back here on Debrief, a face-off between a Democratic head of state and the media is by no means limited to President Donald Trump. Here in Israel, the Prime Minister has consistently and repeatedly slammed the media for, you guessed it, fake news and for being out to get him. But an op-ed in the left-leaning Haaretz newspaper published today has taken it all to a new level and raised an interesting debate. Yossi Klein penned a scathing opinion piece against Israel's national religious sector, saying they are dangerous, more dangerous than Hezbollah, more than drivers in car ramming attacks or kids with scissors. The Arabs can be neutralized, but they cannot be. He goes on to ask, what do they want? To rule the country and to cleanse it of Arabs. Benjamin Netanyahu responding directly to that op-ed, saying this: the Haaretz article is shameful and disgraceful. They've totally lost it. The national religious sector is the salt of the earth. Their sons and daughters serve in the IDF and do national service for the sake of the country and its security. I'm proud of them, as are most of the country's citizens. Haaretz should apologize. Weighing into that debate as well, Naftali Bennett. He's head of the Jewish Home, a religious nationalist party. He weighed in with this.
I served as a soldier in the Sayeret Matkal Commando Force and as a commander in the Maglan Commando Force, where I fought against Hezbollah. I don't recall being Hezbollah. We will continue our activities, and whoever writes such insane articles excludes himself from the Israeli nation.
Then from Israeli opposition leader Isaac Herzog, on the opposite end of the political spectrum, this: the Arabs are coming in droves equals national religious are dangerous equals judges, artists, and journalists are leftists. We're tired of generalizations, he writes. One is outraging and the other is outraging. Yossi Klein's article is worthy of all condemnations. Here with me to try to parse all of that fiery debate here, Yariv Oppenheimer. He's a former director of Peace Now, and Ari Fald, assistant director of Standing Together. Thanks very much for being here. Ari, let me start with you. We have on one hand Netanyahu saying that this sector is the salt of the earth. On the other, you have this op-ed saying that they are worse than Hezbollah. Your take?
Well, the truth of the matter is, if this would have been written in any other country in the world, we would have been up in arms. I mean, can you imagine other countries saying that Jews are worse than terrorists because we can't kill them?
But he's not saying all Jews. He's talking about a specific...
You're right, only the religious Zionist ones, right. And again, 52% of officers coursing the IDF are yarmulke-wearing, soldiers. The employment rate is on a sky high with the religious Zionists. It's just, once upon a time they said it was because of the settlements. And it's the same kind of rhetoric that the anti-Israel people use. First it's the settlements, then it's just Israel, and now it's just Jews. It's really unbelievable to hear such a thing.
I didn't like the provocation saying that the religious people in Israel, the Zionist religious movement, is worse than Hezbollah. It's a provocation, and I condemn it. However, let's talk about substance. And he's talking about a major gap between the movement of the settlers and the state of Israel. And he's talking about the lack of democracy. And he's talking about the differences that we have on the issue of religious and on the issue of freedom of speech and on the issue of what is the place of Arabs in the state of Israel. He actually said very out loud that there is a difference between his Israel that's supposed to be democratic than the settler Israel that is non-democratic occupation, and we cannot hide it. I agree that to compare it to Hezbollah was useless and it was a provocation. By the way, Netanyahu and Bennett compare people in the left wing to terrorist organizations. So they did the same in the past. It's not the first time, but when a lefty is doing it, everyone against it. When the right wing is doing it, only the leftists are against it.
So one very important thing. Yes. I noticed, like Yariv, you have a habit pulling us always to the occupation settlements. He did not say settlers. He said religious Zionists.
The national religious movement that voted for the settler party.
Yariv, listen to me. You're not going to scream over me. It's not polite.
Yeah, we can talk,
Yariv, he did not say settlers. He did not say occupation. He said religious Zionists. The fact that you want to pull everything to your fabricated occupation claim is nice. That's not what he said, Yariv. He said religious Zionists.
I urge you to read it again.
I read it 3 times. He said religious Zionists.
He's talking about taking all the Arabs out of it. This is not about just what's going on inside Israel. This is about the West Bank.
It's a libel. What religious Zionist thinks about you kicking all the Arabs out?
All right, let's play a game of what if. If religious Zionists, if religious nationalists, whatever precise title you want to call it, this is the group of people we're talking about, were in control of the country, the Prime Minister, ruling coalition, and so on. What do you think Israel, honestly, would look like?
in terms of religious Zionists. I think that is proof and put what we see in the army today, where the religious Zionists are part and merging completely within the IDF ranks. You don't see any coercion there. You don't see any wars. You don't see people. Excuse me, Yariv, please don't interrupt me, please. I'm not sure what happens in Israel, but this is not really accepted to do so here. You see that they merge completely. You see that what Yariv likes to push out are yeah, there is fringe, and there are people who are violent. That is not the religious Zionists. That is not the track record.
How would they deal with Arab Israelis, which are a substantial portion of the Israeli population?
So I think that the biggest problem here, again with Yariv, is that he's always talking about the problem
but this is my question.
I understand, so I'm answering you, but this is a political debate. So the problem is not the fact that there are Israeli Arabs. That is not the issue. The problem is the fact that 85% of Israeli Arabs said they're okay with stabbing Jews. That is the problem. If that would not exist, nobody would have a problem with Israeli Arabs.
It's not only about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Jews and Arabs. It's also about the big values that we would like to see in our society. He talks about the army. Let's hear the rabbis of the Zionist movement, the religious Zionist movement, speaking about the place of women in the army.
What are they saying?
They think that they should not be in the same place like men.
So did
and
Israel
they don't believe that this is deeper than that. And let's talk about democratic values and freedom of speech and
Gentlemen,
religious
let's pause one moment.
state.
Let's actually put somebody's words in their own words. What you just referenced, Rabbi Yigal Levinstein, one of the heads of a paramilitary academy. Let's hear what he said.
They drove our daughters crazy. They've been drafting them to the army. They go in Jewish and leave non-Jewish. Not in the genetic sense. They were born to a Jewish mother. Their entire system of values is going wrong. Their priorities. If you're a graduate of the second year, you're hot, a fresh bun, a good religious person. For the Jews, for religion, for God, fire. Of course she's hot, because she's a woman, unless she's served in Karakan. When you're fresh out of the oven, you pick a good, hot wife, religious one.
Ari, do those sound like the words of a modern democratic
So, no,
state?
It doesn't. It sounds like religious words. It sounds like Judaism words. That's what it sounds like. And again, what the rabbi said and by the way, Israel held by that for most of our history. It's changed over the last 2 years. It was known that the situations in the army are not equal. And by the way, the girls who go to the army, they put a step stool under the wall, which I have no problem with.
Do you think what he said is common to all Judaism?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And that's one rabbi. One. That's all it is. And that's all it is.
This is a very respectable rabbi.
No, it's not. It's one rabbi.
Bennett is standing next to him and say, don't resign, don't let him go, and also pay his salary. But this is another example of the big gap between the secular, democratic state of mind and then the religious one. And we see it's not just about the West Bank.
Ari, on that big gap, we're going to come back to that. We're going to take 1 minute. We'll be right back with more of this.
Unflinching, opinionated. Weeknights, David Schuster and Michelle McCory bring you analysis, interviews, and opinions that connect us to the Middle East and the world. Watch Crossroads, weeknights beginning at 6 p.m., only on I-24 News. Every stone, every street, every scar tells the story of Israel. A place that speaks to the souls of Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. Changed by time and conflict, its magic still echoes in the hearts of its people. Watch Holy Land Uncovered every Sunday at 11 a.m., only on I-24 News.
Back here on Debrief, continuing the conversation, a scathing op-ed making a lot of noise right here in Israel that compared the religious nationalists to Hezbollah and more. A lot of debate coming up against that. And here in the studio, Yariv Oppenheimer is former director of Peace Now. Ari Fuld is assistant director of Standing Together. Yariv, before the break, you were saying that all of this exposes a gap between the ultra-religious and the secular. Explain that.
Yeah, it's bigger than that. There is a dilemma, there is a conflict between the democratic ideology and values. They talk about equal rights, they talk about taking out the religious aspects from the state and allow everyone to keep their life, to have balance between women and men. And there is a conflict between that values and the values of the national religious movement. And we need to speak about it and not be afraid. And we can see it when we are speaking about the conflict with the Palestinians and about the rights of Palestinians, about this law that allow Israel to take land that belongs to private Palestinians. This is another example. And we can see when we are talking about how the Israeli society should look like, what is freedom of speech, what is freedom of religious, and what are the rights of minorities and women in the society. And there's a gap between the mainstream Israelis and the national Zionist movement.
So on that note, Ari, a question to you. We're talking about Israel. I'll let you respond. I just want a follow-up question here because we're talking about Israel, a country that is very diverse. We're talking about Arabs, Jews, Christians, Muslim, and secular. Do you think that the religious nationalist movement in Israel now can be inclusive to all of that?
You know, I find it, I'm offended. There's an article that calls for my death, and you're now calling me and saying to me, do I believe in equality? It's a joke.
No, that's not the question.
But there is. In other words, excuse me, you know, I let you speak for 3 minutes. I would like the time.
But that's not the question.
I understand. But I was targeted and said that I'm worse than Hezbollah and can't be eliminated. And now you're turning to me and asking me, can we have an all-inclusive? What are we talking about here? I was targeted to be killed like a terrorist. Now you're turning to me and saying to me, can I live in an all-inclusive? This is ridiculous.
That's not the question. Let me repeat it. Let me repeat it because that's important. I'm talking about the movement, which in this op-ed, which is the subject of this debate, Yossi Klein calls a dangerous movement, more dangerous than Hezbollah, that it's extreme nationalism, that they want to cleanse of Arabs.
No. Clearly this is a couple of words. The words were more dangerous than Hezbollah because Hezbollah can be neutralized. That's what was said.
Sure. That's the same idea. So, Ari, again, we're talking about, Ari.
Yes.
Back to the question. We're talking about a movement that he describes in those terms. The question is, do you think that movement has indeed gone to an extreme? Do you think that it can be inclusive of those sectors of society?
I think that I don't have to justify or unjustify someone's libel about a complete community. It's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. And with all due respect, for the 3 minutes that Yariv spoke, there was, you know, I would say, I don't want to call it a lie, but there was fabrication after fabrication, 3 or 4 different subjects which had nothing to do with this. And I would like to answer those subjects.
Go ahead.
Number one, with the stealing of land, it's absolutely ridiculous. Again, a libel. If we're talking about Amona, the Arabs who were there, and I'm sorry you mentioned it because it's not. This is, excuse me. Yariv, you're going to have to let me talk. You're going to have to let me democracy. You're going to have to let me talk. The Arabs did not have proof of ownership there, 1. 2, if we're talking about the state of Israel, never have the religious Zionists as a whole ever thought or spoken as the radical like that Yariv would like to paint the picture of, ever. We're talking about individuals. If you want to know about radicalization in terms of the government level, it's the left that's violent. It's the left that believes in uprooting Jews to give their land to terrorists. It's the left that shot people in Al Talina, not the religious Zionists.
So let's talk about this polarization.
Shot Jews.
You shot Yitzhak Rabin and Ben Gurion.
The people of
Shot
Jews. Shot Israeli soldiers.
Incorrect.
And you know,
fabrication of history. They never shot.
Rabin. Let's talk about Emil Ritzweig. If you want to go about the history, don't go there.
Institutionalized violence. Institutionalized violence against Jews.
Let's pause here and let Yariv respond.
The settlers were evacuated after the government made the decision to change the line of the border.
I will raise a Palestinian flag if you show me the ownership papers.
And this is the democratic thing to do. But there is a big gap again because they are not believe in democracy.
Who said so?
I think so, because when you are going out of your house in a flat and you open the door, you don't see in the front of your eyes democracy. You see occupation, and this is occupation.
Again,
no, they're living under your control.
All right, let's pause here for a moment. Gentlemen, I want to get some final thoughts. Hold on. Exactly.
Under the PA, you're not Israeli citizens.
Ari,
this is your alibi.
Both of you.
You're partners.
The PA is not a state, you know.
Ari and Yariv, let's pause here for a moment, because this is an example of what we see in Israel. We're talking about an extremely polarized society. In 20 seconds, how do you think Israeli society became this polarized?
I think, again, the fabrications of history, giving another people a national claim based on fabrication and actually justifying their terrorism is what makes the the polarization of his society.
I think that the situation is much better than the one in the studio, because many people, including in the national religious movement, understand that we are here together and we respect the decision.
Thank you.
We respect the decision of the government, and if the government is making the decision to start a new settlements, we accept it. And if the government is making the decision to evacuate it, we accept it, and we are giving everyone the freedom to speak up. Unfortunately, the current government is not doing that enough.
All right, gentlemen, the conversation continues all the time here on Debrief on I-24 News. Yariv Oppenheimer, Ari Fald, thanks very much for weighing in. Clearly a lot still to sort out, and clearly a polarized society.